The ice winds of Cathara's outer reaches howled through the crystalline canyons, a place where even the hardiest of the dragon clans refused to tread. Here among the frozen spires and abandoned mining stations, Aurenya had made her refuge. The great silver dragon crouched in the ruins of an old processing facility, her wings wrapped protectively around 3 small forms that chirped and mewled in the darkness. She had broken the most sacred law of her kind. She had given birth out of season. Among the dragons of the Cathara system, reproduction was a carefully orchestrated affair, timed to the orbital alignments and energy flows that sustained their vast, energy-hungry metabolisms. To birth hatchlings when the cosmic tides were low was to condemn them to weakness, to disease, to death. The Council of Elders had been swift in their judgment. Aurenya was cast out, her mate executed, and she was left to watch her younglings fade in the cold. Already the smallest one barely moved. Its scales, which should have shimmered with inner light, were dull and gray. Aurenya's keen senses could detect the failing rhythms of its biological reactor, the organ that converted cosmic radiation into life-sustaining energy. Without the seasonal surge of particles from Cathara's binary stars, her hatchlings were starving. She had tried everything. She had flown to the far reaches of the system, seeking pockets of radiation. She had even approached other exiles, but none had the knowledge to help. Dragons were creatures of tradition, of instinct. They did not innovate. They did not adapt. They simply worried until the human arrived. Mark Renner had been working solo on a salvage contract when his ship's sensors picked up the anomaly. A massive heat signature in a supposedly abandoned sector, pulsing with an irregular rhythm that suggested distress. Mark was many things: a mechanic, a tinkerer, a man who'd been kicked out of 3 different engineering guilds for unauthorized modifications. But he wasn't the type to ignore a distress signal. His modified shuttle, a patchwork of human ingenuity and scavenged alien tech, set down near the old facility. Mark stepped out into the biting cold, his environment suit's heaters working overtime. He'd heard stories about the dragons of Cathara, but he'd never seen one up close. The sight that greeted him stopped him in his tracks. Aurenya was magnificent even in her desperation. Nearly 30 meters from snout to tail, her silver scales caught the dim light like mirrors, but it was her eyes, ancient, intelligent, and filled with a grief that transcended species, that held him frozen. "Please," she said, her voice resonating directly in his mind, a gift of her kind's telepathic abilities. "If you have come to scavenge, take what you will. But my children, they die. I ask only that you be swift when my end comes, so I do not suffer watching them fade." Mark's jaw tightened. He'd seen that look before, the look of a parent who'd run out of options. He'd worn it himself once long ago, before he'd saved his daughter from a failing life support system using nothing but spare parts and stubbornness. "Ma'am," he said, his voice crackling through his helmet's speakers, "I'm not here to scavenge, and I'm sure as hell not here to watch kids die. Let me take a look." Aurenya watched in confusion as the small human approached her hatchlings. He was so tiny compared to her kind, yet he moved with purpose. He produced strange devices from his pack, instruments that hummed and beeped as he scanned her babies. "Biological fusion reactors," Mark muttered, studying his readouts. "Damn, they're trying to run on empty." "Your kids need particles, right? Cosmic radiation to fuel their systems. The seasonal alignment provides the necessary flux," Aurenya explained, her mental voice heavy with sorrow. "But I could not wait. My mate and I, we loved outside of permission. This is my punishment." Mark looked up at her, and even through his helmet's faceplate she could see the fire in his eyes. Love isn't something that needs permission, and kids shouldn't pay for their parents' choices. "Give me 12 hours. 12 hours. Aurenya's mental voice carried confusion. "What can be done in 12 hours? You'd be surprised what a human can jury-rig when they're motivated." Mark worked like a man possessed. He stripped components from his ship, from the abandoned facility, from every piece of salvage he could find. Dragons might not innovate, but humans were the galaxy's ultimate hackers of reality. He understood the problem. Aurenya's hatchlings needed a steady stream of high-energy particles to kickstart their biological reactors. In nature, this came from cosmic radiation during peak alignment. But nature wasn't the only source of particles. From his ship's reactor, he cannibalized the magnetic containment system. From the facility's old equipment, He salvaged industrial particle accelerators once used for mineral processing. From his own emergency supplies, he sacrificed 6 months' worth of radioisotope thermal generators. And then he built. Orenya watched in amazement as the human constructed what appeared to be a makeshift particle collider, wrapping it around her hatchlings in a careful spiral. He connected power systems that should never have been compatible, bridged gaps with hand-welded joints, and programmed control systems using a battered datapad and what appeared to be sheer willpower. "This is insane," he muttered, more to himself than to her. "It's inefficient, unstable, and probably violates at least 9 laws of thermodynamics I haven't heard of yet. But it'll work. It has to work." When Mark activated the system, Orenya felt the shift immediately. The air around her hatchlings began to shimmer with Cherenkov radiation, that beautiful blue glow of particles traveling faster than light through a medium. The makeshift collider hummed to life, creating a localized storm of exactly the kind of high-energy particles her babies needed. The effect was almost immediate. The smallest hatchling, the one that had barely been breathing, raised its head. Its scales began to glow faintly at first, then with increasing brilliance. The other 2 chirped with renewed vigor, their biological reactors finally receiving the fuel they desperately needed. Orenya's mental voice cracked with emotion. They're stabilizing. Human, what you have done, Mark," he interrupted, already running diagnostics. "Name's Mark Renner, and we're not done yet. This thing will run for about a month on current power. After that, your kids should be strong enough to handle lower radiation levels, but you'll need to find a better solution." "A month," Orenya repeated, her massive head lowering to examine her reviving children. "A month is everything. A month is life." She turned her ancient gaze to the small human who had defied the impossible. "Why? Why would you risk so much for beings not of your kind?" Mark was quiet for a moment, watching the baby dragons as they began to play, their scales now shimmering with proper light. Finally, he spoke. "Because the galaxy's got enough rules, enough councils, enough people saying what can and can't be done. Sometimes somebody's got to look at the rules and say, not today, besides." He smiled behind his faceplate. "I'm a mechanic. We fix things. That's what we do." Word of Mark's intervention spread through the underground networks where the exiled and forgotten congregated. Within weeks, others came. Outcasts from a dozen species, all with problems their societies had deemed unsolvable. And where dragons saw immutable laws of nature, humans saw engineering challenges. Orenya's hatchlings thrived, growing strong in their mother's love and the glow of human ingenuity. And Mark? He stayed because there were more impossible things to make possible, more rules that needed breaking, more lives that needed saving. Because that's what humans did. They looked at the word impossible and heard a challenge. They met despair with stubborn hope and ancient tradition with innovation. They didn't accept the world as it was, they built the world as it should be, one jury-rigged miracle at a time.